it's Mari from Mari's Miscellany. I'm glad you're here. I'm talking today about the Sentro 48 needle knitting machine. I will be giving my review and some advice. The machine comes with feet that have a hole in the bottom of it where suction cups fit. Or if you remove the suction cups, you can fit screws or some other mounting device like that. Now, it doesn't come with anything to mount it other than the suction cups. They work great on some surfaces, but not on others. And you don't always want to permanently mount it somewhere. I discovered that these Velcro dots work very well to stabilize each of the feet and keep the device from shifting too much. And since they are adhesive, you can remove them when you're finished with them. The biggest frustration that I had is that there is no telling what yarn is going to work on the machine. Even if you find one yarn that works fantastic and you buy a different colorway, there's no guarantee that that other colorway is going to work well. There are all kinds of slight differences from one colorway to the next. It all has to do with how the dye interacted with the fiber. I'm reminded of the fact that these are marketed as toys. And I think that there's a certain point where one must accept, okay, this yarn is not going to work on this machine, try something else. One of the recommendations that I completely agree with, depending on the specific pattern that you're making, for most of the things that I've made so far, using waste yarn to cast on and off has been a time saver and a sanity saver, because the first few rows have looser tension. Same with the last few rows when you cast off. What I've discovered is that using waste yarn works all of that looseness out in those first few rows, so that by the time that you put on the first color that you want to work with, it's worked all of those issues out. Because some of the yarns create slightly different fabrics than others, even in the same type of yarn, one colorway may create a slightly different fabric than another. What I recommend for waste yarn is to find two yarns that create the exact same fabric, but are contrasting colors, so that when you shift from one color to the next, it's not going to change the tension or anything like that. Pair those colorways together and use them as waste yarn for each other. That way you'll work out all of those loose and wonky things at the beginning and the end, and the beginning and end of your actual item itself won't have any of those weird tension issues. Another piece of advice that I highly recommend is that you pull the yarn up. So pull some of it from the skein or the ball or cake or whatever it is that you're working from. Allow a little bit of the yarn to gather up. And as you're doing that, check the yarn for knots or anything like that. Make sure that the yarn is nice and loose and that there is no resistance between this yarn and the first tension bar on the front of the machine. When you do that, make sure that it sits through this tension feeder on top properly. It will help the machine maintain a steady tension. If you come across any knots or anything that will be problematic or that may not fit through the tension feeder, make sure that you take the yarn out of it and hold the yarn to make sure that it feeds through properly. Besides the fact that the machine is finicky about how it works with yarn, the other problem is all kinds of things lead to drop stitches. All roads lead to drop stitches with these machines, which means that the machines must be stabilized, because any extra shifting is going to read either as tension ridges in the fabric or cause drop stitches. One common place where I got drop stitches often was at the color joins, every time that I would switch color. And I discovered that if you take the tail ends together, give a little twist, and apply a binder clip, it will provide enough tension to hold those ends together and make sure that they feed properly through the needles. Anytime that there's a sudden stop in the machine because it caught on a knot or something like that can result in a drop stitch. What I do is if there's a sudden stop, then I pause, I look at everything, I push down on the needles that are standing up to make sure that the stitches are seated properly. I look for drop stitches. I fix whatever problems are. Before I start cranking again, I hold on to the machine to get it going so it can work through those first shutters. Once those first shutters go, and then if I need to stop again, just make sure that I press down on it again before I start cranking. Another source of drop stitches is when the fabric gets too long and it drags on the surface. One of the things that happens is that it can push up on this fabric and it can push the stitches off of these pegs. What I found can fix that is rolling the fabric up and securing it with binder clip. Also, I found that using clips like that is helpful because it helps to maintain the tension on the fabric and again results in less drop stitches. So absolutely use clips or something along those lines for weights. All right, so I got a 3D printed attachment that is a plastic cup with velvet lining and a metal tip. This slides over the handle and a power screwdriver fits onto that. And turns the handle so that I don't have to do that manually. I like this a lot, but I think that it is only good to use when you have a non-problematic yarn running through the machine. As long as the machine is anchored securely and you make sure that you keep the yarn with no tension with no resistance on the front, then you should be able to run the machine with the screwdriver and have very few problems and very few drop stitches, as long as you do all of those other things. That's been my experience. Would I recommend this device? No. To be perfectly honest with you, I really wouldn't if you know for a fact that you're going to be using it all of the time. If you do charity knitting or retail knitting, or like me, if you're trying to do dye blanks, I would just go ahead and get a better built machine, even though it's at a higher price point. It is true that there are some people running Etsy shops cranking out hats left and right with the Sentros and machines from this price point. It absolutely can be done, but these machines are toys and they're not designed for that purpose. And just because of the experiences that I've had with this machine, I personally would not recommend it for someone who's going to be using it daily. That said, I'm glad that I have it, and I will just be using it for dye blanks so that I don't wear it out until I can get my adding. I think that I might have fun with it once in a while, but I'm concerned that the more I try to play with it for fun, the more that I might find another yarn that might mess the machine up. So I just kind of want to stick to what I know for now. I think that it's possible that the yarn magic or thread magic or whatever, I gotta look that up. I think it's possible that that may fix a lot of yarn and machine compatibility issues, but because I don't have any of it, I'm not certain about it. I would have to see it in action to know whether or not I can recommend it. I would recommend the machine if you are a hobby crafter and you don't knit and you want to work up some really cool looking garments and accessories and even some decor and toys. There's a lot that can be done with it considering that it is a toy. I think that the toy marketing is cover your assets, as we used to say in the military, CYA. I think that that's what that is, because the machines are all plastic. There are so many things that can and do go wrong that they're not designed for heavy use. For now, I'm kind of frustrated and by feeling constrained by only having 48 stitches. And then also, if you want to do a panel, you'll only get 44 stitches in a panel. And the reason for that is with the tube you're just going around and around, so you can use all of the needles. Whereas with the panel, it's creating edges, and it needs 2 needles on each side of that edge to wrap the yarn around so that it can create that edge. So you only get 44 stitches out of a panel. I think that down the road as a designer, and I have time to look at it, I may find some fun in the challenge of finding new and interesting uses for what you can get off of these machines. I do know that you don't have to be stuck to plain knitted fabric. You can do things like purl and fair isle, but I played around with it a bit and I found it to be so tedious and excruciating that I wanted to scream. I cannot stand it. But the reason is that I've been knitting for a few years now and I've been crocheting for all of my adult life. So I instinctively correct all of those problems. And when the machine was having problems and dropping stitches, it took me all day long to make a hat on the machine. I could make a hat in an evening and not feel aggravated at the end of the experience. Take it with a grain of salt. Take all of the advice that people are giving in terms of how to stabilize, how to prevent drop stitches, all of that stuff. One word of warning, I have witnessed some people in tutorials using drills or power screwdrivers to push through problematic yarn on the machines, and I totally wouldn't do that because yeah, you can just crank harder, but if the yarn is problematic, then there are problems. If there are problems, then there's going to be symptoms eventually. And I feel like forcing the yarn through by forcing the mechanics of the machine just seems like a bad idea. I would not want to do that. Also from personal experience, because I wanted so desperately for my chunky weight baby alpaca hat yarn to work on the machine that I did that. I was cranking it through and forcing it through. The more you do that, the more problems the machines develop. You may not see it today, but I would be concerned that those problems would stack up. You can strip the gears and all kinds of things like that would happen. I think it might be more acceptable of a risk on a better built machine. All right, y'all, I have more knitting to do, and then I can get to cranking out some more dye blanks, and I can get back to dyeing some yarn. I will take y'all with me on those adventures if you want to come along. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, enable notifications, do all of that good fun stuff so that YouTube can tell you when I have uploaded a new video, and you can come along for some new fiber arts and crafts fun. I will see y'all later. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.